Welcome, everyone. If you have signed up for the Carleigh Variant listening session, you are in the right place. If you feel comfortable doing so, please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. You can tell us your name, where you live, if you belong to an activist group that you'd like to mention. And then we're going to post a picture with instructions on how to submit questions during the listening session today. So, okay. So welcome everyone. We are here at the Carleigh Variant listening session. And we're going to start sharing our screen, and it will have some icons on how you go ahead and submit questions. So you can either raise your hand and then ask your question, or you can submit it in using the Q&A feature. So if you utilize the chat by accident, we'll ask you to move it over to the Q&A feature, but we just can't do it because we are hosts and cannot access the Q&A feature to submit things. So just please take a moment to review the notes on the icon that outline how we'll be utilizing the Q&A feature to upvote questions that people submit during the listening session. And we'll just wait a minute or two, and so everyone can get joined in for the Carleigh Variant listening session. So if you're just logging in now and you feel comfortable doing so, please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat, where you live, what your name is, if you belong to an activist group that you'd like to shout out. And while everyone gets logged in, I'm just giving, hi Trisha. Okay, hi Betsy. Excellent. So, all right, it is 7:03, so we will go ahead and start. So welcome again, and thank you for joining us. My name is Jill, and I am part of the leadership team for the Southern New Hampshire Indivisible. We are a registered chapter of the National Indivisible progressive grassroots movement of millions of activists in all 50 states working to build a real democracy of, by, and for the people. Before we begin, just a few housekeeping notes. You had seen on the icons sheet of how to go ahead and submit a question. You're going to be utilizing the Q&A feature and not the chat to do so. So you should have a little button at the bottom that has the Q&A on it, and you'll be utilizing that. So tonight we are sponsoring a community listening session with Carleigh Variant. Southern New Hampshire Indivisible is hosting listening sessions with a variety of candidates as we approach the 2026 midterm elections. The purpose of these events is to have an interactive conversation with those folks who could soon be representing us in our national and state governments. We feel it is important for you to have the opportunity to ask questions of those candidates. Our moderator, Mark, will be pivoting between asking questions that were submitted prior to tonight's session and reading questions asked using the Q&A feature. I'll start by giving a brief bio about Carleigh, and then we'll get into the main event. Carleigh Variant is a union organizer, teacher, chair of the Hampton Select Board, and mom of two who has dedicated her life to strengthening communities and fighting for working families. After graduating from Mount Holyoke College in 3 years, Carleigh taught in the Marshall Islands, working in a public school system still living with the legacy of the U.S. nuclear testing and the impacts of climate change. That experience shaped her belief that it's not enough to point out what's broken. Leaders must help build something better. Back in the United States, Carleigh helped lead the successful campaign to unionize Harvard's graduate student workers, winning higher wages, child care subsidies, and anti-retaliation protections for thousands of workers. Carleigh earned a Master of Theological Studies and a PhD from Harvard, where she focused on ethics, American history, and nuclear policy. Since 2022, she has taught at the Harvard Kennedy School, examining how public policy and religion intersect across the immigration, climate, labor, education, LGBTQ+ rights, and foreign policy. Carleigh has also brought her lifelong advocacy to local government, helping elect Democrats across New Hampshire and winning a seat on the Hampton Select Board. As chair of the Select Board, she has been a strong advocate for public education and fair school funding, climate resilience, clean water, affordable housing, and lower property taxes. Carleigh is running in New Hampshire's first congressional district because we deserve a representative who fights for peace, who knows what it's like to go on strike, bargain for a contract, budget for a family on a single income, and serve in elected office. Learn more at www.carleighbariant.com, which you should see the link in the chat there for that if you want to click on it and save it for later. And now we'll get into the main event.
Amazing. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for being here tonight. It's really, really nice to be in a Zoom setting with everybody. And I'm just grateful to be with you, whether you're cooking dinner or coming home from work or have a little bit of time this evening. My name is Carleigh Bariant, and I'm grateful to Southern New Hampshire Indivisible for hosting these sessions, for organizing them, for bringing people together, and for doing all of the things that we're doing in our communities right now. It is so awesome to see how many people have gotten involved. And one of the things that I think is really important is organizing, as you can tell maybe from my bio. But I really do believe that when we organize, that's how we can build power and make change. So I appreciate the organizing that all of you are involved in. And I'll just give like a brief summary. I am running for Congress because I am very frustrated with the way things are going in this country. I feel like we can't keep doing the same things over and over again and expect anything to change. And, in Hampton, especially right now, as the chair of the select board, I really have seen up close how many people are being harmed by the lack of support that we get in our communities from Concord and from Washington, D.C., and how that means, roads that we can't afford to pave, or libraries we can't keep open, or paraprofessionals and firefighters we can't afford to hire, and how this is straining our own household budgets. How many people are hanging on by their fingernails right now is something that really upsets me. There's a lot of 80-year-olds in my community who have gone back to work in the past year to pay for their property taxes or to try to make up for some of the cuts to their health care plans that they had, and it's wrong. And I don't want to live in this kind of country. And so I've done everything that I feel like I can do at the local level. I helped start a early childhood coalition in Hampton. I've been very vocal on the front lines of a lot of different immigration issues. I'm part of a Home for All housing coalition, and I would love to hear from you what you wish that politicians understood better, and what are the things that are keeping you up at night? Because it's a real joy to be able to hear about the things that are pissing you off or stressing you out, and then maybe be in a position to do something about them, which is what this is ultimately all about, right? Who do we want representing us down in Washington? So thank you. And any questions that you have, I'm happy to answer, or any thoughts you want to share with me. I'm also happy to direct you to links on my website. I've written and published 12 op-eds this year on a variety of issues, from data centers to the Sununu Youth Services debacle, and how our federal delegation needs to do more to call for um, a federal investigation into what's going on there and why it continues to be so egregious, to the situation in the Middle East, from Iran to the genocide in Gaza. And so I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. So let me turn it over to the people who have questions or thoughts.
Thank you. So my name is Mark, and I'll be asking you questions tonight. I want to start off with something unique about you, which is that apparently you don't use social media for your campaign. And is that true? And why did you decide to not use social media?
Awesome. So that's a great question, Mark. Why don't I use social media? I also saw Ken put in the chat a question about the op-eds. They're all linked without the paywalls on the website under blog. There's a little thing for op-eds, so you can see them there. Or you can search like the Union Leader or the Concord Monitor. Why do I not use social media? Okay, is it possible to ask for a show of hands? How many people how many people are really satisfied with the political influence that the right-wing billionaires who own our social media companies have on our political system?
Yeah.
Anybody? Yes. Okay. This is part of it. So a large part of why I don't use social media is because increasingly people aren't using social media, and don't think it's a great tool for organizing and building power and enacting change. I'm a mom. I'm also a teacher, and for like 2 decades now, I've seen the harm that social media causes people when it comes to like eating disorders in kids and self-harm and radicalization. And we're now at a point where, Meta which is the company that owns Facebook and Instagram, have been held criminally liable for harming children in court. And I think we need to have so many more protections for consumers and so much less surveillance and data harvesting and attempts to radicalize and make us frustrated about the things that are wrong in this country and only kind of show us the most extreme ends of either position and not enough organizing and conversation and community. So I'm not using social media for a lot of reasons. A huge part of it is because I just don't think it works. I mean, I think that if social media was really effective, we would have had a really different outcome in 2024. And I really, really want to keep my eyes on the prize here, which is bringing the owners of these platforms into account for the harms that they are causing. I want to break the stranglehold they have on our political system, and I want to get out. In the district and talk to and hear from regular people, which I have spent now the last almost 12 months doing. And it's been incredible. And it has really taught me that regardless of party, people in New Hampshire want to be able to afford to live here. We want to be safe in our homes, and we want the temperature of the politics turned just like so much further down.
Okay, good answer. Yeah, social media is toxic as far as I can tell. Um, so yesterday, I think the Trump administration made a settlement with the Trump administration for $10 billion in damages from a lawsuit that Trump filed against the Trump administration for when he was president the last time, and the IRS had a data dump that exposed 400,000 tax records, including some of the Trump's tax records. Um, and then the Trump administration settled with the Trump administration out of court for $1.7 billion, which was at the time the most stunningly corrupt presidential act in the history of this country, or just the most corrupt act so far, because today, apparently that agreement has been amended to include permanent immunity from tax fraud investigations for his entire family. Do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, I wonder.
Oh, what the heck? That's
Yeah.
garbage. It's hot garbage. I mean, we all know it. We all see it. Like, and we can't stop getting, I don't want us to say like we shouldn't be getting mad about it because it is absurd. Like they have literally as a family, I was just looking up the number, like over $3 billion in profit. And again, to go back to social media, like Trump literally started his own social media company because prior to his election, he saw, oh, every time something happens, like Twitter gets cited in news coverage of it. Let me start my own social media company so that everyone has to cite my company all the time and think of how much money I can profit from. I think that we have like the most corrupt people in the history of the United States in charge of our country right now. And the fact that we have a judicial system and a legislative branch that are enabling this is deeply, deeply outrageous and keeps me, I don't know how any of my hair is not like all of it's not gray right now. There's so much that we can do about this, though, from like reforming our judiciary to ensuring that when people like me are in Congress next year, we have the opportunity to say that we're stopping this, right? And it's not just saying, "Hey, Trump, like you are a criminal, you have been held liable. Here are the impeachment proceedings, and here are the ways that all of the people in your family who are profiting illegally from your being in power are going to be held accountable." And saying, hey, as Congress, we also need to hold ourselves accountable and make sure that we have Congress people who are not trading on insider information, right? Like congressional stock trading still a thing, judicial stock trading still a thing. And we need to make sure that these are things of the past so that we have a system that's more fair that people will believe in. And so I think that's incredibly important. But again, like this ballroom, like the presidential library, like the big jet that he got, these are symptoms of a much deeper rot. And right now we have seen that there are tech companies in this country that are literally paying their way out of being held accountable. Like the biggest funders of this ballroom and the biggest funders of his library and all of the people who are reaching these settlements like Paramount, and we're seeing this media consolidation. This is stuff that we can fix. We are a nation of laws. We have laws that we can use to hold the president and his people accountable, and we need to be doing that.
It seems impeachment is just an incredibly high bar to actually do anything. And as long as the Republican Party is on board with this nonsense, they can effectively block anything we do on the congressional front. It's an impossible situation. I don't actually know how we get out of it, but we got to try our hardest to do something. So, on a completely different topic, the other day you were at the Manchester Library Forum with a bunch of other candidates, and that seemed to be going very well until the very end. What the heck happened?
It's a great question. I think what happened is there were people who were there to hear the forum, and there may be people there who wanted to disrupt the forum. But either way, people wanted to hear all of the candidates answer about whether or not the situation in Gaza is a genocide, what we're going to do about it, and how we're also going to address the increases in anti-Semitism and anti-Muslim sentiment that we're seeing in the United States. And, it was. I think interesting that towards the end of the forum, this question was not going to be asked. And then someone stood up and said, this question always gets neglected. And I think that that feels true. Like, as a Democrat, I have been longing for our leaders to have this conversation because I think it needs to happen somewhere. And we see what happens when it doesn't, right? There's nowhere for this conversation to happen constructively. And that is such a problem. We need to be able to talk about how we're going to stop the genocide. We need to be able to talk about how we can help people rebuild their lives in Palestine. We need to talk about how we're going to keep, Jewish people in the United States safe. All of these are conversations that we should be able to have as a country. And it really, really frustrates me that it doesn't feel like we have been doing a good enough job at this.
Yeah, so I guess what's under my question is, and I think you sort of brushed against it as well, was it deliberate to not bring this up?
I have
Was
no
that
idea.
that's
It's a
some
good
sort of
question.
agreement to keep, for example, to keep the pro-Israel candidates from having to state a position on this?
I mean, one of the things that's been interesting to me in this race, as somebody who is, not taking any money from APAC and who, really appreciates the work that groups like Jewish Voices for Peace and J Street and Not in Our Name, like all of these groups are doing amazing work, and people have been doing so much important work on this for such a long time, is that I hear about this all the time. Like, I heard about it when I was at Temple Israel and after Shabbat, like for Shmooze. You have people from a whole variety of political positions having conversations. I heard about it when I met with the members of Coalition for Just Peace in the Middle East. I've heard about it from my students. And as someone who, teaches about religion and conflict and peace, like, I think a lot about this. And I don't know if it is deliberate not to talk about it, but it's something that we need to talk about. And so, any opportunity that I can find to have a conversation or to hear out people who have very strong feelings about this, I take that. Because as a representative, like, we need to be able to hear from everybody and we need to find a path forward. And that's just not happening sufficiently right now.
It is a particularly painful topic for people who are, for example, my wife is Jewish, and for her, she just feels this great sadness that the Israel she loved as a child doesn't seem to exist anymore. It's this other country that is just a bad actor in the world and not a beacon of justice in the world. And it's just incredibly painful.
Yeah, it
Um,
is. And I know, Mark, like, I think a lot of people feel that way about the United States right now. Like, the story that we were told about what our country is and who we could be, it often feels like it is not, and right now more than ever, in real conflict with, what our stated mission is as a country. Like, we need to get on track and figure out, like, what are we going to do? And again, like, a big part of that is being able to bring people together and have that conversation. How much money do we want to spend on healthcare? How much money should people be spending on their housing? Is it reasonable to expect somebody to pay as much money as they pay to send their kid to daycare to go to, I mean, to UNH to go to daycare? Like, those are conversations that this country needs to have. And I just feel like there's so many of those that just kind of get short shrift.
yeah, really, when my youngest son put his kid in daycare, he mentioned what the cost was, and I was like, it was college tuition cost. It was $35,000 a year. It's like, how do people afford that? I
I don't
mean,
know the answer. Where does the money come from? Like, I got another job. My husband's a middle school teacher, so like he also got another job. And that kind of feels backwards to be getting another job so that you can pay to send your kids to daycare so you can spend less time with them. If I had known how much it would cost to send my kids to daycare, or that I would have to wait like 8 months to find a daycare that would accept them, or that anytime, they had a sneeze or a fever, like they would have to stay home for 4 days, or that the people who are taking such good care of like my babies were getting paid $16 an hour, I would have lost my mind. I did a little bit. Like I organized the graduate student workers at Harvard, and childcare policy was like my area that I worked on at the bargaining table, and also like after we got our first contract crafted. But I just think that it's something that people who are older maybe don't recognize unless they're helping out with their kids, and people who are younger have no concept because it is so, so crazy.
it was just crazy. And then we have these idiots making up phrases like women are underbabied. And well, people maybe not having so many babies because it's so freaking expensive to raise them.
Yeah, right. And like our
Yeah.
climate's in like catastrophe. Like I don't know, but it's also amazing. Like having kids is the best. And this is why we need politicians who know how cool it can be and who can create policies that can support families, like and really invest in young kids and their education and their health and really help parents, manage that.
So we had two questions submitted by the audience that are pretty much overlap. And these were submitted in advance. Um, and basically there is what is your position on stopping arms and funds for Israel as it commits genocide and pogroms? Will you refuse to take any money from AIPAC and other pro-Israel groups and to wait? And if elected, what steps will you take to end U.S. complicity in the genocide in Palestine? I think we sort of started covering that, but why don't we just fill it out?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was gonna say I have a little bit of like a card here, so it says very clearly, right? No corporate PAC money, no war, no APAC. I am somebody who loves peace. And I love the idea that the other night, this is a longer way to answer this, but the other night there was a vigil for a trans woman, Juniper Blessing, who was murdered in Seattle doing laundry in her apartment building. And at that meeting, a lot of people were sharing how they felt. And one of the things that most touched me was someone said, when I was younger, I learned a song at church and it said, "Let there be peace on earth and let it begin with me." And I believe that I have that capacity. And I do think that a lot of us need to recognize the power that we have, especially when we organize. So, no, I do not take any money from APAC. No, I will not support spending any money on like offensive weapons for anybody in the world and not Israel. I will support putting money back into USAID. I will support putting money into, making sure that there is municipal water and sewer in the United States and in Gaza. I think that we need to end the settlements in the West Bank. I have a lot of thoughts on this, but it's just really important right now that we recognize that, the horror of what we're seeing and like the great moral injury that is to watch a genocide unfold and to feel like our leaders are doing nothing about it. Um, is really hard, and it has come out in really horrific ways here in the United States. And so we just need to also be mindful of the way we treat one another and the language that we use. And I think also account for like the real harm and loss and isolation that a lot of people from different Jewish communities are feeling right now, because a lot of times it feels, I think, from what people have explained to me recently, that, saying we oppose the genocide, a lot of people are waiting to hear people acknowledge like the crimes that Hamas committed. And this isn't to say that there is a moral equivalency in any way, shape, or form, or say that I support Hamas, but I do think it's also important to recognize just how much so many different groups of people are suffering right now. And that includes Israelis and the families of people who were harmed or assaulted by Hamas on October 7th.
Indeed. So we have a war in Iran, or maybe we don't. It's hard to tell what's going on there anymore.
Hmm.
Um, it seems like the U.S. and Israel are allies in a war of aggression against anyone who they perceive as an enemy in the Middle East. What should we do about that?
Stop fighting wars. So I'm gonna add my nobody voted for it. And it's not just like it's an illegal war. Like there's like I wouldn't vote for a war if it was a legal war. Like we shouldn't be having wars. We don't need to spend money on this. And we need to stop fighting them. We need to stop enabling them. And the war with Iran is so horrific, not just because we're obviously losing and have lost so much, and because of all the people who have been killed by it, and how much instability has been, brought to the region, and how it's destabilizing our own country with the incredible, like, global economic shocks. We need to stop spending this much money on war, and we need to have a conversation about how we do want to respend our money, right? How do we prioritize our expenditures as a country?
The Trump administration is apparently going to propose a 1.5 trillion military budget for next year.
No, I would not vote to support that.
Really, it seems atrocious. Um, Immigration. Uh, do we have an immigration crisis in this country? Is
Yes.
there any justification for rounding up people and putting them in concentration camps?
No, there absolutely isn't. I'm going to put in the chat my plan for after we abolish ICE, which is like a roadmap that I created for a just immigration system. And I see a couple of people on this call. I see Betsy, I know you're here, who I have met over the course of the last year, every first Tuesday of the month in Manchester. The Granite State Organizing Project and a group of interfaith leaders put on something called the Jericho Walks. And they're from 9 to 10 a.m. And there's a meeting afterwards for immigration support organizing. And these vigils are so incredible because they bring together so many different people to hold space and witness and be present for people doing immigration check-ins. And this is something that I think is really important because I might talk a little bit more about religion later on, but I do think that Democrats don't always recognize the incredible value that people of faith have played in civil rights movements in our nation's history and are continuing to play on issues like immigration. I'm also somebody who spent every Thursday in January at the Rockingham County Commission meetings testifying when our county commissioners had before them the opportunity to sign a contract to house detainees, ICE detainees in our county jail. And this is something that I very, very strongly opposed. And I invited a number of volunteers for my campaign to accompany me to these meetings and to testify. And ultimately, we managed to get the county commission to vote to table the contract. And that wasn't necessarily inevitable in any way because, two of the people on the county commission are Republicans and there was only one Democrat. And so we weren't sure what outcome we would get, but we still thought it was important to show up and to attempt in good faith to persuade the people making the decision. And ultimately, we were successful. And something similar played out here in Hampton, where I'm now the chair of the select board, where we had a petition warrant article come before us this year that said the town does not want to partner with ICE. And initially, the board voted 2-2 on that. And I thought that was unacceptable. And so during the deliberative session, somebody came up and they amended the article, and I asked the select board to revote. And we managed to get a 5-0 vote against ICE in a really purple community. And that is a warrant article that passed overwhelmingly at town meeting. And so I just think there's a lot that people in New Hampshire agree on when it comes to immigration. Like we are appalled by what is happening with ICE. We are frustrated by the fact that our legal immigration system has come to a complete standstill and that refugee and asylum seekers um, are not being given the opportunities to come find safety in the United States right now. And I think that, we need to stop housing immigration with our law enforcement and treating immigrants and people who come to this country as though they are criminals, when in fact they are not. They are people who deserve a path to citizenship. And that's what I lay out in that blog that I put into the chat.
The dehumanizing language of illegals and uh, posing them as threats to this country has had its effect.
Yeah, words matter, right? How we call each other, what we use to describe one another, like those words matter. They shape our perspectives and the world that we live in.
They frame the debate.
Yeah.
So our wonderful Supreme Court killed the rest of the Voting Right Act last week
Yeah, it's
and
terrible.
immediately the former Confederacies stepped up and eliminated every Democratic district they could get their hands on, all of which were majority black districts. Um, any comments on that?
Yeah, I think we need a new Voting Rights Act. And I think that, they've been chipping away at it in bigger and bigger pieces for a while now. I think it's pretty reprehensible. And already, like, we live in a country where the majority of districts are so gerrymandered. And this is also an issue in Democratic districts, just not enough to give us power as Democrats. Um, but the districts are so gerrymandered that it's literally the politicians who are picking their voters. And that is so profoundly wrong. I'm somebody who really believes that we can fix this by doing things like, well, one, fixing our Supreme Court, by which I mean adding more justices and ensuring that they adhere to a standard of ethics that is what we would expect of everybody else in our government. Like they should have to give public reasons for whether or not they're going to recuse themselves. They should have to disclose whether they own companies or what stocks they're trading, and they shouldn't be able to trade stocks. I'm someone who believes like gerrymandering is kind of a race to the bottom. I really love democracy, and I think more democracy is better. So I would support statehood for DC. That would be a great way to increase the number of representatives we have. And I also think that a new Voting Rights Act would have to deal not just with gerrymandering and like the absolutely vile lack of representation that minoritized populations and like especially right now Black people in the South have in our government, but also take into account like campaign finance and the problems that we have as a result of money in politics. So a new Voting Rights Act that, increases our ability to vote. Here in New Hampshire, we just passed laws at the state level, right? We didn't gerrymander, but we made it so that if you have to register to vote for the first time, or you haven't voted in the past 5 years and you've been purged from the voter rolls, you show up to register and you're going to need your birth certificate or your passport. And this is something that's going to make it so that a lot of people can't vote. And this is a problem. Voting should be something that we get to exercise, and our government should be making it easier for people to vote in their elections, easier for us to have free and fair elections rather than harder.
It used to be entirely bipartisan that access to voting should be encouraged and improved. And it's completely become a partisan issue, which is just stunning.
Yeah, yeah. I
Um,
mean, I will say this is another place where I really like having municipal experience because, like, at the local level, I have all the confidence in the world in, like, the Republican who is our supervisor of the checklist, and in, like, the moderator, who's also a Republican who's previously on the select board with me. And I really think that it's important for us to hold on to the fact that, like, so many of us want this. Like, one of the things that I really do believe at this point is that the people are not the problem in this country, our leaders are, and they need to be held accountable and they need to be voted out.
Going back to the Supreme Court, would you also support term limits for the Supreme Court?
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
good.
I also support term limits for our elected representatives in the House, and in the Senate. I think that term limits are an important thing, and they really help us live up to the idea that our founders had when they created the House of Representatives, which is, it's supposed to be a citizen legislature, and we understand this so well in New Hampshire. You serve 3 terms. If you don't get it done, you give somebody else the opportunity to tap in and take a shot.
Yeah. I used to be opposed to term limits. I've completely done a 180 on it.
Oh,
I
Mark,
think,
what made you change your mind?
well, first of all, it's the Supreme Court. It's clearly there's a problem there. But also just the fact that we have a and I'm old enough to be part of it, gerontocracy
Mm,
in Congress is just absurd. The Democratic Party in that in is stuck in the 90s because they have people who are just too old to apparently too old to realize what that the government that they were part of 30 years ago doesn't exist anymore.
yeah.
They, there's this fascist regime, and they refuse to step up. They're still talking about bipartisan this and bipartisan that, and well, we have to play by the rules, and it's not working. Um, anyway, yeah. term limits. And you already said repeatedly that insider trading has to stop. That you can't be getting rich off your inside knowledge in the Congress, making bets on what Trump is going to do tomorrow. And it's not even a chance. You know what he's going to do, and you're trading. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, huh, okay. Human rights, reproductive health care. Abortion is now basically criminalized in the Confederacy and similar states. And recently they tried to get rid of abortion pills as somehow a a perfectly safe method of know getting an abortion was also going to be banned. Um, what are we going to do about that?
Gosh, this is so important. And this is something that it's like we so many of us has said that thing like it's crazy that our daughters have fewer rights than we do. Like it is crazy that my like 7-year-old has fewer rights than I do, or I did when I was her age. That's really, really disturbing because I'm only 37. But like there are a couple things that we can do on this. And obviously like something like codifying Roe versus Wade, doing away with the Hyde Amendment, like those are obvious things that the Democrats should be standing for and that I would absolutely be doing. But like that's really kind of the floor in terms of what should be allowed. The Hyde Amendment, for anyone who doesn't know, is what prohibits people from using federal funding. So people who are on things like Medicaid from using their health care to access abortion care. But one of the things that I think is really important that we recognize is that, and I heard this from a doctor who works with Reproductive Equity Now and the Abortion Freedom Fund, which are two awesome organizations that are really, really doing important work here in New Hampshire. That actually it's easier now for women to get an abortion in the United States than it was 10 years ago. And this is because of the prevalence of telehealth and the passage of so many shield laws. So, like, if you're in a state like Texas that has made it almost impossible to access abortion care, like, you can get a telehealth appointment with a doctor in New Hampshire or Massachusetts, and you can get, mifepristone and misoprostol sent to you. And so I do think that, last week when that was called into question, everyone kind of stopped breathing for a second because it was like, wait a minute, what's going to happen here? And the answer is you can take two misos, but it's not as good as taking a mifo and a miso. But the point that I want to make is that, like, this is something that we've been fighting for a very long time, and there's a lot of work ahead of us. But like reproductive freedom and rights should include all sorts of different things. Like it should include things like, bodily autonomy, gender affirming care should not be criminalized. Politicians should not be making these kinds of decisions for families or for patients. People should be making these decisions for themselves. And so I think this is really important, and when I talk about reproductive rights, I think about things like ensuring that same-sex couples can can foster kids and can adopt across this country in a way that they are currently prohibited from doing. And I think that's incredibly wrong. And I also think that, making sure that people have access to things like IVF, right? And prenatal care and postnatal care, supporting families and getting a bigger sense of like, it's not just one person getting an abortion one day. It's thinking, who are these people who are getting abortions? Like, for whatever reason. And if a lot of them happen to be moms who already have kids, right? Which is true. How can we better support moms, right? Who already have kids? How can we support people in this country better? Not just, say, okay, here's a right that you have, and then walk away and say we've fixed that problem.
Okay, I'm going to turn to some questions from the Q&A chat right now. So the first one is from June Guerin. What are your thoughts on AOC's recent call to action for the North to pull up to the South? And quite frankly, I don't know what the phrase pull up means, but I think it means that we need to engage as people did perhaps 60 years or 70 years ago, um, in terms of combating what is essentially a new Jim Crow that is being implemented
Yeah. Solidarity forever, June. I think that's a great question. I think that, one of my favorite organizers in American history is a woman named Ella Baker who worked organizing with SNCC, so the young people in the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Campaign. And she would bring, white and black people down from universities in the North, in New England, and around the country to the South to help sharecroppers get registered to vote. And what she would say to the students who are going down there isn't like, oh, go tell these people like what to do. They'll listen to you. It was shut up and listen. You might learn something. And so I think that, obviously there's a way for us to work across state lines, and across regional lines and across difference. And I also think that, you have to do that with humility. You can't just go in and pretend like, oh, the North is going to save the South. Because the South doesn't need saving, right? People need rights and they need access to power that they don't currently have.
Yeah, another red line gets crossed every day in this administration. Here's another question from Anonymous. I read that one executive of a utility company, I think it was Eversource, compensation is 15 million annually.
Oh my God, I
It
read
was
this
a high
too.
percentage raise from the previous year. The
Yeah.
article also mentioned three other execs got a 20% raise from last year. Well, we all got 20% raises, didn't we?
Ha! Yeah,
All
your
this
cola, right?
utility rates keep rising. Do you have a comment? Do you have any ideas on how to rectify the situation? Do we have any?
Oh, I love this question so much. Thank you, Anonymous, for asking it. I absolutely have thoughts on this question. So there was, I think, an article maybe in the Boston Globe today or one of the most recent days about like these Eversource executive pay packages. And one of the things that was interesting is that they said a lot of the money that the executives are getting and like shareholders get has to do with the infrastructure that the company has invested in. So that's something we pay for. Like if you look at your utility bill, it's like not just the cost of like the energy that you use, but it's like the infrastructure that the company uses to get it to you. And one way that they can essentially raise costs and have like astronomical profits while the rest of us are like being destroyed by our insane energy bills is to say, oh, we need to do like $4 billion worth of transmission line replacement this year. And oh, that cost is getting passed on to you, consumer. And this is something that drives me wild. It is deeply wrong, especially because our Eversource dispatch and transmission workers have been on informational picket because in New Hampshire it's illegal for them to go on strike for the last year. And I don't think they've gotten a contract yet for fair working hours and fair pay and the ability to yeah, work in a way that supports their families. And so I think that it's egregious what's happening and that Congress should absolutely be stepping in there and cap how much they can either make from this or like the way that their pay structure is incentivized and passed on to consumers, because that's something that should not be happening and especially not while we are struggling. It's like when you read like, oh, hey, like I paid 50 friggin' $6 to fill up my Impreza the other day. And like, oh, you're telling me like it's because of the war, but I also read that like, the oil company, like the gas company made like record profits last quarter. That's interesting. And like the way that they're taking advantage of us and we don't have enough people fighting for consumers, and consumer protections down in Washington, D.C. right now.
Yeah, it does seem to me that what PSNH has, or who the Evergreen Eversource has done, is that after we got to choose energy suppliers and they got less regulated, they simply turned around and started making much more money off of delivery costs. They figured out how to game the system, and what a shock. Um,
Yeah.
they need to be re-regulated is what needs to happen.
Yeah. And we can do that, right? Like we have a path to how we do that. We've done it before. It's a great, thing to do. We just need people in Congress who will actually do it, right? And prioritize consumer protection and regulation and breaking up monopolies.
The other thing that happened with them is as soon as they were threatened by community power all across the state, they made sure that their rates were just low enough so community power was no longer viable.
Hmm. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
another shocking development. All right, Anonymous again. Have you and other progressive candidates talked about pooling resources and support at some point in the near future to ensure that a more centrist, corporate-friendly candidate doesn't win the primary? But before you answer that, what drives me nuts is we still have primaries where you can just get like 10% of the vote and win. It's crazy. It's stupid.
Yeah, I
We
love
should
ranked choice voting.
we should have ranked choice voting so
Yeah.
people don't have to strategize about which awful person to vote for. But
Yeah,
now go
right.
ahead to the question.
Yeah, or there's something called like approval voting, which is like another idea where you say, okay, here are the people that I like would approve of or not be opposed to representing me. I mean, there is so much that we need to do in this regard. Earlier on in the primary, someone asked this question to all of the candidates, and I indicated that I was amenable to a conversation about like, hey, like, what is, the plan for this? Like, is this something like, do we all see ourselves as running in the same lane? Like, do we see other candidates as running in a different lane? And I gotta say, like, am really proud of, um, I have put 22,000 miles on my car driving around this district. I have been in every single corner of the first district of New Hampshire. I have been in people's living rooms and their driveways, and I have been in a lot of church basements and attics and union halls. And everywhere I've gone, I have listened to so many people. I never ask, are you a progressive? Because I think that a lot of policies that are progressive are good policy, and that a lot of people in New Hampshire actually really support. And I also think that, it would be really awesome if we could have somebody down in Washington who is a working parent, right? Who's been on strike for their own job on multiple occasions and sat at a bargaining table, who's been a teacher and a listener and an organizer, and who really has experience not just beating Republicans, but working at the local level to make life sustainable and better. And so when I say that I think a lot of people in New Hampshire really like progressive policies, like, everywhere I go, I hear about how much people hate their healthcare and our healthcare problems in this country and how much the cost of healthcare is going up. And it's, individuals or people who lost their ACA subsidies or people who, had an income that was low. And so they have their ACA subsidies, but are just getting terrible care or having a harder time accessing it, or who saw their Medicare Advantage program disappear in their county with no advance notice, or who hate how many hours they spend on the phone with their friggin' insurance company trying to get them to cover things that they know are covered, or going back and forth to try to get them to code something differently so it won't cost you. And I mean, these are things that my support for universal health care, right? This idea that people should have access to care from the day they are born, before they're born, prenatal care, until the day they die. That should include things like vision and dental and mental health care. It should include your ears, is something that, maybe in 2020 or 2016 felt like very progressive policy, but I really do hear support from that from like across the political spectrum. Because in part, people realize that, the incredible cost of healthcare right now and how much we're spending on administrative costs and insurance companies um, is bankrupting our municipalities, and it's raising our property taxes in New Hampshire. It is raising our property taxes. Universal health care would lower our property taxes in this state. And that is a position that I take, and I welcome anybody from across the political spectrum who wants to support me in this race, whether or not you're a progressive. And I have, endorsements from across the political spectrum because I think people just want a real person who, gets their ideas from the bottom up and is willing to fight for our families down in DC.
Yeah, I don't think people understand necessarily that their property taxes are driven largely by salaries for the school system and the benefits for those school systems, primarily healthcare. And
Yeah,
those costs are just enormous.
they're
And
so high.
they're so high, and they could be that could just be eliminated if we just had a federal system that provided universal health care, paid for by a payroll tax, wherever we fund it. There's plenty of money. We got $1.5 trillion for war. I think we can
Yep.
find $500 billion for healthcare.
Exactly. And that's the thing, Mark. It's like you don't just say this if you sat on like a budget committee or you've gone through your town's budget or your school's budget, but if you have, you definitely know this and feel it. But like you're right. We have to have this conversation. What are we spending our money on? Like, yeah, healthcare isn't free, but we can reallocate the way we spend our money right now to ensure that people get better care and can take care of themselves and their families and stop spending so much money on things like war. And I think, these are policies that really appeal to a much broader swath of the electorate. And so I just hesitate for us to carve up, voters in New Hampshire when people really do contain multitudes. And, I don't know if we're looking, well, people should have the option to vote for the candidate that they want. And I'm really grateful for all of the, people who have shown up and volunteered for my campaign. We have over 600 people right now. And I think it's because we have a lot of fun, because we realize we have no alternative but to fix this country.
So our Social Security trust fund is being depleted
Yeah.
to meet current obligations because the boomer generation is getting old. They're already old and they're all
Yeah.
retiring. And it's this was entirely predictable and it's stressing the system. It'll eventually resolve itself, but in the meantime, the fund could actually run out. What should we do to address that?
Yes, um we should lift the cap on paying into Social Security. Right now, like if you make above $186,000 a year, you no longer pay in any percentage of your income or your salary to Social Security, and everybody else who makes under that does, and that's blatantly unfair. So we should lift that cap so that, if you're making $50 million a year, you're paying the percentage of your income to Social Security that everybody else is. And that would make Social Security solvent for like at least another generation.
So you don't think we should like raise the retirement age to 80?
Ha ha ha, right? I know. Or what did Sununu say the other day? Impose work requirements on Medicare recipients? Like what? You already
Yeah.
work. That's why you're getting it. That's the promise we made. What is happening? No, I do not support raising the raising the retirement age to 90.
Who knows? That could be a reality. What was it? Speaker Johnson was whining the other day about how he has to do like well, not illegal, insider stock trades because his miserable compensation of $180,000 a year, which is three times the median salary, um, hasn't been raised since 2009, which coincidentally was the last time the minimum wage was raised. Um, I understand their costs went up, but how about we tie their raise to the minimum wage raise?
Yeah, I mean, I don't even think we need to tie their raise to the minimum wage. Like, I think $175,000 or whatever Congress people get plus healthcare is actually a great deal. And I think that, you shouldn't expect to go get rich being in Congress again. But to your point, yes, we absolutely need to raise the minimum wage. You'll see this delightful framed poster from like over a decade ago on my wall as a piece of
It's
history.
obsolete.
It
15
is
is no
obsolete.
longer adequate.
It's obsolete because if we were to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour, that's still only like $30,000 a year, which is not enough to live on in New Hampshire. It is so ridiculous. And for anyone who says, oh, that hurts small business owners, what hurts small business owners is having to pay out the teeth to, give healthcare to their employees. That should not be something that is on the employer. It should be something that our government does because everyone should have access to it. And it would enable our, businesses to raise wages for people, and people need to make a living wage. And this has been something that, this country we've been fighting for. It feels like for 100 years at least, and we're still not there. There's a lot of fight left ahead of us in this one.
Yeah, I just want it to be raised and then automatically adjusted for inflation.
Yeah, I
So that we
agree with that.
don't have this political bullshit every couple of
Yeah,
years.
exactly. It shouldn't be political, right? Like it shouldn't be politicized in the way that it is because, like it costs as much money to live as it costs. And to say like, oh, it's a Republican year, it's a Democratic year, like we're gonna, do what we will with it. It makes no sense.
Along with all the other horrendous things that are happening, it seems that we still have a problem with the climate.
Yeah,
Do you think maybe we should do something about that?
I do. So at the very beginning, when you all read my bio, you read that I used to live and work in the Republic of the Marshall Islands, which is amazing. It's a country that's in the middle of the Pacific. It's about halfway between Hawaii and Australia, and at the highest point is only about 8 feet above sea level. And it's also where the U.S. tested 67 nuclear weapons after World War II. And, it's dealing with both this nuclear legacy and like absolute climate catastrophe because of things like rising sea levels and warming waters and salinization of all the food crops and coral bleaching. And what's crazy is that like in New Hampshire, here on the coast, like we're dealing with so many similar things. And what's really frustrating to me is that we just don't have partners in Washington right now who are helping us with this. And so what I mean by this is like right now, climate funding, and even before Donald Trump came back into power, climate funding is so hard for municipalities to access, and it is so important for our well-being. And, if we had the ability to support our homeowners and our businesses and make our communities more resilient, we would do it. I think that we need, to do things like incentivize electric vehicles and solar panels and wind power and not more oil and gas exploration and mining. And I think that one of the big reasons we don't have this, to go back to where we started, is corruption. Like there is so much of a revolving door between people who are in office and who lobby on behalf of companies that want to make sure that we don't have, a Green New Deal. We don't make this transition. And there are so many more of us who realize that having energy that is renewable or that is reliable or that is affordable is a real imperative right now. And that we can do that if we just put our, will into it. Um, Energy is so important. And climate is, in New Hampshire, like we have so many amazing resources here that are going to be, it's going to kill our economy and it's going to kill our nature and it's going to kill our kids and our families if we can't have clean drinking water and we can't have green energy and we can't have a place where we can breathe the air and oceans we can swim in. So climate is something that, lives at the forefront of my mind, even if it's not on the front page of the newspaper, just because like without a planet, like what are we as a country? If we are, what are we as a species? We need a planet.
Yeah, indeed. We have one more. Well, actually, we're out of time.
Well, you can
Um,
ask one more. I'll answer it. I'll be very fast. I'll say one
I don't know
sentence.
what this question means.
Oh, okay.
Are you one of the Courage for Democracy candidates?
Courage for democracy? No, but I'm Googling that right now.
I have no idea what that means.
It's a pack. Courage for Democracy pack. Um, oh, I love this. Citizens impeachment. Yes, we're all about this. Courage for democracy. Yes. All right, I will look into this. I will look into this and see what the organization is. But if you do want to learn more about me, or if you ever want to get in touch, please send me an email. You want me to elaborate, or you were not sure, you wanted to ask your question in front of everybody, or you have one now that's raised by something that I said, feel free to send me an email here at carleigh@carleighbarriant.com, or check out my website. We have like maybe 190 or maybe 200 now blog posts based on stories that I've heard about the campaign from people across the district throughout the campaign, and things like how we can address housing, our housing crisis in this country, how we can fix our immigration system, how we can stop military funding, how we can end corruption, and how we can restore our democracy together, um, because that's going to be the best way to do it. Thank you.
Right. That I'm going to hand it off to who am I handing it off to?
Jill.
Oh,
I appreciate you,
Jill.
Mark.
Thank you. It was a fascinating conversation.
Thank you.
All right. So thank you so much to Carleigh and to all of you for joining us tonight for our listening session. Please check out our website to see what other listening sessions and events we have coming up. I put the link in the chat. Look for us at rallies and weekly out on our New Hampshire bridges. So once you're on the website, you can navigate to our Google Calendar to check out and see where we'll be and what we're up to. You can also sign up for our newsletter to get weekly emails to see how you can help us spread democracy. So the New Hampshire Indivisible is a registered chapter of the National Indivisible Progressive Grassroots Movement of millions of activists in all 50 states working to build a real democracy of, by, and for the people. Thank you again so much, and everyone have a great night.
Bye, everyone. Take care. Thank you so much for your questions and for being part of this. Take care.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.